countryside.
G'day, I'm Mal Leyland. My wife Lorraine, our daughter Carmen and her husband Robert have already completed one full circuit of Australia on a caravan and camping odyssey that most people only dream of. And the adventure continues.
The Leylands, Australia.
We film our own gypsy highway lifestyle as we undertake an endless journey of discovery.
Let the Leylands show you the way. The Leylands will show you Australia. Let the Leylands.
There's so much more to see, so come along with us. The road ahead awaits us. Dawn greets our camp in the Barmah Forest on the 1000th day of our great caravanning odyssey around Australia. When we left Brisbane in Queensland almost 3 years ago, we had no idea we would still be completing our first circuit of the country at this time. It's time to move out of Victoria into New South Wales and take on the next leg of our adventure. We'll travel along the Newell Highway, passing through Forbes and Dubbo and on to the Warrumbungle National Park in the northern part of the state. Along the way, we'll take a ride on the wild side, meet a bloke who still uses Clydesdale horses to plough his paddocks.
We're going to drop in on some fair dinkum sheepdog trials.
See the oldest slab building in Australia, study the heavens at Gilgandra,
and we'll walk through the Warrumbungle Ranges.
we cross over the Murray River at Tocumwal and enter New South Wales. Tocumwal is derived from an Aboriginal word meaning deep hole and began as a small river port on the banks of the Murray. It soon developed into a good-sized village and expanded rapidly when the bridge was built over the river in 1895. Today it's popular with anglers seeking the famous Murray cod. We decide to base ourselves just outside the main town area by staying at a large sprawling caravan park set in the bushlands around the banks of the river. It's a popular camp because it offers natural bush-style settings with all the modern comforts like power, water and amenities. The local kangaroos like it here too and wander between the campers every afternoon. To see the Murray River from a completely different perspective, we're taking a ride in an amphibious vehicle known as a lark. It's based at the bushlands on the Murray Caravan Park.
Owner of the park, Stuart Rowe, operates the lark every day, providing a wild ride through the river gums, sandy beaches and waters of the Murray. The word lark is an acronym derived from the British Army identification of light amphibious resupply cargo vehicle. This one is capable of carrying 5 tonnes and is the baby in a range of larks which can carry as much as 50 tonnes. The waters of the river are extremely low at the moment, but it's in these conditions that this unique vehicle thrives. Passengers love it and come to Tocumwal especially for the experience.
About 5 kilometres out of Tocumwal is this exposed outcrop of granite on the top of a hill. Curiously enough, even though it's on the top of a hill, it has a hollow in it here, which is known as the blowhole. The reason it's called the blowhole is that in times of drought or when the Murray River is very low, water actually comes up out of the ground through this hole, bubbles out and runs down there, so it's a permanent source of water. Although no longer used by farmers as a water supply, there was a time when early settlers depended on the blowhole to get them through the droughts.
A great feature of the Tocumwal area is that they not only have beautiful strawberries, but you also get the chance to pick your own. Got some more here for you.
Oh, great. Thanks. Now look at this one. That's a beauty, isn't it?
Oh, wow.
The fruit is succulent and tasty, and picking our own is great fun. The Scenic Drive Strawberry Farm is a business owned by the Hayes family and started by Michael Hayes.
How many plants here and how much do you have under cultivation?
About 8 acres, about 120,000 plants. We grow 80,000 first years and the balance in second years.
At picking time, the farm is hectic, with professionals working a full day to keep up the supply to the packing shed. Most will be in the fresh fruit stalls within a day or two.
We pay for our selection of strawberries by weight. The owners are well aware that most pickers will taste the odd one or two. The farm has its own delicious jam for sale too. There are no prizes for guessing what we're having on our toast for the next few days.
We return to the park, load up the caravans with fresh strawberries and move off to head north along the Newell Highway. Next stop, the Weddin Mountains, where bushrangers once roamed.
Show you the way.
Just north of Tocumwar, we're attracted to a farm on the side of the highway where Ron Stewart practices ploughing with his own team of Clydesdale horses. He loves working with horses and regularly competes in ploughing competitions.
I've been with horses all my life. And, oh man, that horses. It's something I do. I enjoy it. I drive trucks. I find it very pleasurable to come home and be able to yoke up a team of horses and go down the paddock. Well, that's your back band. That sits over there, your chains, trace chains. Your collar. They're your hames. And then your bridle. But a horse never pulls. A horse does not pull.
What does it do?
He pushes.
What do you mean?
Well, you have a look where his collar is and where the horse is actually.
At the back.
The horse is behind the collar, so he's pushing into the collar.
Oh, yeah.
If he was pulling it, the collar would have to be back.
At the back, yeah.
At the back, so he never pulls, he pushes. So when they say, oh, he's a good puller, he's a good pusher. If they can get a good heavy pull, they really love it. And they'll lay into the collar and really get stuck into it. They originally were bred in Clyde Valley in Scotland. Two brothers bred them because they could not get horses that were steady enough to plough with properly. And in Scotland, the ground's fairly wet. They wanted bigger feet. So they bred these from whatever stock they had, and they crossbred them, and then that's what they end up the Clydesdale. But that's what they wanted. They wanted something that'd plough, steady, and wouldn't bog down in the ground. And then they said, well, they come out here and they more or less shaped the nation. Well, all your crops were put in with horses. A lot of blokes didn't have enough money in those days to buy purebreds, but they'd be using half and three-quarter breds. A lot of your wagon teams, if you see the old photos, they've got a lot of halves and three-quarters, even bloody trotters and all that, whatever they could get in those. But these were their main horses. You always seen one of these out of the lead because they're reliable.
Ron drives a truck for a living but works his horses for relaxation. He's quite happy to let the 21st century scream past on the highway while he ploughs away in the style of the 19th century.
Further north, we leave the Newell Highway and head east into the Weddin Mountains. Protruding like an island from the flat cultivated farmland, this small rugged range was once used as a refuge by a notorious gang of bushrangers including Ben Hall, Frank Gardner and Johnny Gilbert. The track in is gravel and quite rough for the last few kilometres to Seaton's camp, where we follow a walking track which leads to Ben Hall's cave.
These hills made great hiding places for Ben Hall and his gang.
In fact, as you reach the top of this walking track, we reach a spot where we can look out over the valley and see how he would have chosen this as a good place to watch out for the police that were looking for him. His most famous exploit was robbing the gold coach from Forbes, in which he yielded over 2,000 ounces of gold. But in spite of having all that wealth, he still ended up spending a lot of his time living in caves like this one. When they finally did catch up with him, they actually shot him with a shotgun in an ambush, and he yelled out, "I'm wounded, shoot me dead." The police willingly obliged. And so, with his last wishes fulfilled, Ben Hall ended up being buried here at Forbes, his body riddled with holes and full of lead. Forbes began as a tent town of about 30,000 people when gold was discovered here in 1860. It quickly grew, but the gold gave out and it survived as a pastoral centre. Cobb & Co. horse-drawn coaches maintained a regular service to the outback town and once stopped at the Albion Hotel.
Underneath the Albion Hotel is an extensive set of cellars, and because it was a coach terminal, it had another use. When it was time to transport the gold out of town, it was brought here underneath this pub by a series of underground tunnels which linked the pub to the banks. The idea was to prevent the gold from being stolen before it was loaded onto the coaches that were leaving town. The catacomb of linking tunnels has been backfilled long ago, but the hotel still has the gold assaying rooms where miners could have their finds weighed before they moved to the vaults of the banks via the same security tunnels.
Just 4 kilometres south of town, Gum Swamp is a wetland wildlife sanctuary that has a permanent hide on its shoreline so that visitors can observe the activities of the thousands of birds which frequent its waters. The bird life here is so rich and varied that at some times there are 70 different species in residence at the same time. Waterfowl use the swamp as a breeding ground and nesting area, and in times of drought it becomes a vital refuge for these animals. The best time to catch the most activity is in spring, but even in winter there are plenty of birds to provide a pleasant interlude for those interested in spending a little more time in Forbes. Our time in Forbes is almost over. We must now move north along the Newell Highway. Next stop, Dubbo.
At the Leylands, show you the way.
Dubbo, with a population of more than 35,000, is a major city of regional New South Wales. It grew from a modest beginning as a homestead on the banks of the Macquarie River. The homestead was a popular spot to rest up with mobs of cattle in the early days and eventually became a major settlement. It's a great place to rest up for a while on our journey north too, and has plenty of interest for travellers.
In Macquarie Street, tucked between 2 banks, the old Dubbo jail provides an opportunity to see what life was like for those who broke the harsh laws of colonial New South Wales. Still in use until 1966, the jail is now open to the public as a tourist attraction. The cold, cramped and lonely cells held lawbreakers of all kinds, including bushrangers, thieves and murderers, as well as petty offenders. For those who were uncontrollable, a padded cell and a straitjacket were used. The wild inmates were simply left in the locked padded room until they were subdued.
Oi, you! Not right now!
There were several attempts to escape from the old jail, but for most, incarceration usually meant doing the time. Prison life in the 1880s through to the middle of the 20th century was very harsh. Exercise yards provided only short breaks from the monotony of the confined cells. Perhaps the most thought-provoking exhibit is a gallery telling the story of the 8 hanged men who paid for their deeds with their life. A few were absolute killers, but most were more likely victims of prejudice and circumstance.
R. Check surrendered himself to the police whilst reporting that he had accidentally killed his employer during a fight in which he claimed to be defending himself. Incredibly, he was convicted with no evidence of murder and, in spite of public protest, made the final walk up the 13 steps to keep his appointment with the hangman's noose.
Just a few kilometres out of town, we drop into Jeddah Boomerangs, where visitors get to learn a lot about these traditional flying weapons. Owners, Boyd and Joe Skyver have been making, selling and explaining boomerangs for years.
This particular boomerang is actually designed for hunting lunch. Okay, kangaroos, emus, wombats, lizards, snakes. No, they don't actually come back, thankfully, because these travel at 80 kilometres an hour, and you basically take out the legs of lunch. We actually use mulga because mulga is an incredibly stable timber. It's also very heavy. We use bent timber for a very specific reason. We need to make the boomerang fit the lump of wood. Now we do that because the grain needs to run in the right direction. The history of the boomerang is a rather unique history. Most people in Australia seem to think that the boomerang was actually invented by an Aboriginal here in Australia. It actually isn't. The boomerang pretty much comes from South Africa. Boomerangs have been found in Africa, India, Indonesia, Vanuatu and Australia. That's literally how they got here. They walked here with the first, immigrant the Australian continent had. In the United States of America, the Hopi Indians called it a rabbit stick because they used to chuck it at rabbits. The Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun, when they busted open his tomb, the very first thing they found was a box full of boomerangs. Weird, eh? So you've got Syria, Germany, Holland, Poland, Denmark and the Eskimo. All used to chuck them at each other for years. The oldest boomerang found anywhere on the planet up until today is 23,000 years old, and it was found in Poland.
According to Aboriginal tradition, Boyd tells us it's bad luck to fly a boomerang without first decorating it, so we get to finish off the ones destined to be our very own. Flying them, however, proves a little more difficult.
That is a little high. Mother, look out. That's it.
Wrong, Robert!
Perhaps the best known attraction in Dubbo is the Western Plains Zoo. This unique concept allows more than 1,000 animals to roam within enclosures carefully landscaped to represent the natural environment of their land of origin. Visitors may drive around in their own vehicle, hire a motorised buggy, or ride cycles around the 6 kilometres of sealed roads which meander around the 300-hectare parkland. There are no cages here. People come face to face with exotic creatures from all over the world. The free-range zoo concept allows people to observe Australia's only herd of African elephants. The zoo is divided into several geographical regions: African savanna, Eurasia, North America, South America and Australia.
Without doubt, the Siamang monkeys are one of the most entertaining of all animals here. They live on an island as a family. The close-knit family group is just how they live in the wild. They're strongly territorial and call out to declare their territory to other Siamangs. This calling or singing strengthens bonds between the male and female of the group and is amplified by large inflatable throat sacs. Next, we visit the oldest slab house in Australia.
Show you the way.
Dubbo has many attractions. One of the most unusual is a huge collection of military vehicles, aircraft and wartime collectibles designed to enlighten visitors about how difficult conditions were for those who served in the conflicts of the past. All of the equipment on display here has been restored to working order by the man who collected them, Barry Ryan.
The main thing is to preserve this equipment for posterity because it's part of our history. We're not promoting war, we're not condoning war, but we want to preserve it for posterity. And also, the big thing I think we're achieving here is showing people the conditions that our soldiers operated in, the confinement of the vehicles. A lot of people don't believe that there's so little room in these things.
Just how confined and claustrophobic conditions were for our infantry becomes apparent in the underground bunker, which has been constructed to exact World War II specifications by the 5th Engineers of Penrith. It has an accommodation area with sleeping quarters and deeper down a narrow tunnel, a machine gun firing pit.
Completed about 1842, Dundullah Mill Homestead represents a fine example of a slab house. In fact, it's considered to be the oldest slab house in Australia. To gain access to the historic old homestead, we enter through a sandstone stables building. The slab hut method of construction was quite unique and was used mostly by the early settlers because they were able to use materials which were readily available in the surrounding bushland, and it didn't require any nails to hold it together. The way it works is like this. On the bottom here we have a piece of timber laid on the ground which is called a plate. This is usually made of cypress pine because termites won't attack the cypress pine. It has a groove carved in it, and these vertical slabs of timber, and that's where the name slab comes from, are actually set into that. They're knocked in and pushed down with a hammer, and you've got slabs which go right to the ceiling. Now, to stop the drafts coming through the cracks, which would obviously result from that, they filled it up with a pug. The pug was made from sand, lime and cow hair, and that was pushed in here to stop the wind from coming inside. The exterior of the building was painted with a lime wash. Now, the lime wash was made up using fat, animal fat, ash from the fire, from a wood fire, and this was boiled together with rock lime. Now, while it was hot, it was painted on the outside, and that gave the outside protection.
The inside of the house has been finished off to a very high standard for a slab house. The lounge even has plastered walls complete with wallpaper.
Now when that bell rings, people out here would know that they're being called into the main house because this was the kitchen area. The kitchen actually burnt down many years ago, and all you can see now on the ground is the mark where the kitchen once stood. That's why, in fact, the kitchen was a separate building. Just in case there was a fire, at least the main homestead didn't go down with it. There goes the bell again. I think Lorraine's trying to tell me something. I better go back and show you the rest of the house. This is quite large, although it's not actually a pantry. This was probably used as a storeroom for silverware, cutlery and things like tablecloths. Anything that was needed for the dining room, which is adjacent just here. In the dining room we can appreciate exactly how the slab construction worked, especially in the ceiling. If you look up here you can see these exposed beams. They've been squared off using an adze, and they suspend from one side to the other side. Now, they're not held up there with nails, they're simply held there by gravity. And to stop them moving in the corners, up here, they've made a fancy dovetail joint. You can't actually see that dovetail joint because it's concealed above the top of the wall.
The homestead has two sizable bedrooms, all finished to a high degree of comfort, even when compared to the expectations of folks 1.5 centuries after it was built.
This is not just a good example of a slab-built home, it's also an example of a well-designed homestead. Here, the master bedroom has French doors, and at the top of these French doors are louvers. Louvers to catch the breeze and keep the bedroom cool. Now, the owner was very interested in keeping the house cool because it gets very hot here in summer. So he made these verandas very, very low. They go out a long way, far too low to walk out comfortably, but it does provide maximum shade on the side of the house. But the most unique feature here is here on the ground. What he'd done here is put cobbled stones. Now, these cobblestones are set in cement. Water will be put out over these during the day, and as the water evaporated, so it would keep this big slab cool, and therefore help to keep the air cool and the house cool. The bloke that owned the property had spent some time in India and Batavia, and that is where he got these ideas. One room has been left just as it was prior to the restoration, so visitors can appreciate what lies behind the walls. Travellers were few in the early days of settlement, but to accommodate those that did come by with news and fresh supplies from the east coast, 2 strangers' guest rooms were provided on the southern veranda.
Only after the pastoral leases were absolute did the settlers construct something more substantial. It took the form of these impressive stables. The sandstone was quarried on the property. Most property owners replaced their slab huts with brick or stone buildings, but here, apparently the owner was quite satisfied with his homestead the way it was and left it standing. The elaborate stables building has its own blacksmith shop, complete with forge. Thanks to the National Trust and the work of many volunteers, these historic buildings are now preserved for future generations to appreciate.
We return to the van park, pick up the caravans and move on up the highway. Next stop, Gilgandra.
At the Leylands, show you the way.
We head north along the Newell Highway from Dubbo toward Gilgandra. At the turn off to Umudgery, a sign indicating dog trials catches our eye, so we make a short diversion. The trials are being held in a paddock opposite the Drover's Dog Hotel. Blokes and their dogs from all around have gathered here to test their respective skills at working a flock of sheep through a set number of gates, yards and races.
The objective of the competition is for the handler and the dog to complete the full set of obstacles within 10 minutes. Points are deducted if the dog nips the sheep or the handler actually works the sheep himself.
Stop! 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 Sit. You hop up it. Right up. Stop! Here. You stop. Stop. Here. You stop. Come over here. Stop. Go back. Sit.
The dog judged to be the most efficient is the winner. The finer points are all too complex for the likes of us who have never seen it before, but the spectacle makes for a fascinating afternoon's entertainment.
Stop. Here, sit. 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 Stop. Go back. Sit. 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 Steady. Sit. Sit.
Although these smaller country events are essential good practice for the more competitive larger gatherings such as the Royal Easter Show in Sydney, we suspect that they're just as much of a social outing as a serious competition.
We are quickly made welcome and spend a pleasant few hours with some new friends and of course their dogs. We return to the highway and while there is still some daylight left, move on to Gilgandra.
Gilgandra is in the heart of observatory land. In this part of Australia, the skies are clear for more days, more often than other parts of the country. As a result, it is the centre for astronomical observatories. This one is privately owned and was built many years ago by an enthusiastic farmer and amateur astronomer.
This telescope is a Newtonian reflector that Jack built in 1948 when he got back from the war. He used bits and pieces of old farm machinery. The base is a flywheel off a Lister motor. He's used the clutch out of an army jeep. The shaft comes out of a combine for sowing the crops, and the white telescope itself is the flue out of the heater for the shearers' quarters. And he ground the mirrors himself. The observatory was built by a retired farmer, Jack Hestings, and he used bits and pieces of old farm machinery. Now he cut the dome out and his three sons welded it up. And he's used bits and pieces, as I've said, off the farm. The dome weighs 1.5 tons and it rolls around on 6 rollers out of an international header. He opens it up with a washing machine motor out of his wife's old washing machine. I think she went back to the rack. And he uses the gearbox out of the local flour mill. Just give it a push, Robert. Only weighs 1.5 tons. Deceptively light.
The main telescope is a 300mm reflector type and is open to the public at night for stargazing.
During the day, we can't look at any stars, but we do look at sunspots on the sun. Now, obviously, we can't use our big telescope to look through at the sun because it'll burn your eye. And so what we do is we project the sun onto a screen and to see sunspots. So that sunspot there is almost the size of the Earth. You fit the Earth inside the sun about 1.3 million times. So it's very hot.
You can't even look at that glow. It's just like when you're welding.
Get your eye nice and close. Yeah.
We can see the moon during the day, but it's at its most impressive in the night sky. Next we explore the Warrumbungle Ranges.
At the Leylands, show you the way.
Perhaps the best known and most sensational national park west of the Dividing Range in New South Wales is the Warrumbungle National Park. It features the rugged volcanic spires and domes which make up the Warrumbungle Range. The foothills are home to thousands of kangaroos and wallabies, and it is in the foothills among the wildlife that there are several major camping grounds. We choose to use Camp Blackman, the only one which offers powered sites for caravans.
We can see through there to there. As soon as we've settled in, some of the more friendly kangaroos move in to check us out. Perhaps they're looking for a handout of food, but it's not a good idea to provide any. It is better for their health to be living on natural native grasses.
Not many places you can do that.
By nightfall we have a great campfire going.
Oh, that looks pretty good. That it has, yeah.
What could be better than freshly cooked damper?
See whether it's cooked. Smell all right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sounds
good. What's it called?
How is it?
Very yummy. It's the golden syrup that makes it.
No, I've got honey in mine. I'll have to try a bit with golden syrup.
Yeah, well, make your own. Yeah, around the campfire.
With morning, we join Ranger Bill Robinson, who conducts special tours to Tara Caves, an Aboriginal occupational site.
What we have here is a bush tucker food called a ruby urn heat. We call them foriogs. We lift them up like that and look underneath and we can see the fruit growing on there. The red berries come on there.
Yeah. They're mature now, are they, or what?
No, they don't get mature till around about September. Tastes like a nut. Yeah.
Oh, do they?
They're sort of a pick-me-up.
Yeah.
When they
Like a lolly as you go along.
These rugged mountains attracted Aboriginal tribes for thousands of years, and there are many sites in the hills of their occupation. Only a handful are accessible to the public. The track to Tara Cave is well developed and includes elevated walkways. Oh, so this is the cave bill.
I'll just close that bit. Those groove markings there, you see, were done by the Kamilaroi people, sharpening the tools. The Kamilaroi people were the people that occupied this area. This cave been occupied about 4,800 years ago. The Warrumbungles was the ceremonial place for them. They used to mine the ochre out because this cave was rich in the ochre, this stuff here.
Where did they mine it? Out of the roof or something?
Out of the roof, in little pockets you see underneath there. If you ever look underneath, you see those little dark pockets are all ochre. And that's what they used to crush up and paint the young boys. They used to bring young boys in here for initiation.
Oh, right.
Like if they had 2 or 3 boys at a time to be initiated, they'd bring them in here. They had this stuff. This ochre was their money, what they traded with. You could buy 2 or 3 wives with a piece of ochre that size, but you didn't want to, you know.
Yeah, wishful thinking.
Yeah. There were about 7,000 people in the tribe, but they never travelled in that big group. They'd split up in about groups of about 200.
After a full day walking through the hills, we returned to camp in time to cook our evening meal. Travellers in the winter time look forward to a nice, hot, hearty meal at the end of the day. This is a quick and easy recipe to make. It's called porcupine meatballs. The first ingredient is a tablespoon of onion. Add the grated onion to the bowl. Add 750 grams of minced meat. Add half a cup of rice, uncooked rice, some nice freshly ground pepper, salt, and then mix that all together. Make sure it's mixed in well. Just forming it into be careful of the kookaburras, we're surrounded with them.
Have they been invited to dinner?
No, they haven't.
What are we doing here, Nick?
I'm forming these into meatballs. Makes about 16 balls. I'm adding the meatballs to a saucepan that has a tin of tomato soup in it and half a cup of water. There would have been 16 there, but the birds got one of them. That was Robert's.
Oh, sure it's not Mal's.
Cover the saucepan, then bring the meatballs to the boil and simmer that for about 45 minutes. Served with fresh vegetables, it makes a delicious and simple meal.
My one's short.
It depends on the meat sometimes.
Good. It's really nice.
Yeah, I wouldn't be stuck in an office for quids. This is all right. Now we're going to need a good meal because tomorrow we're going to be doing some walking. There's a couple of short tracks and there's a really big one, Grand High Tops. Now I don't know whether we'll make the whole track, but Robert and I are going to have a tackle at the big one.
I'm not going on the big one.
We're about to tackle the Grand High Tops walk. We're setting off here from Camp Pincham first thing in the morning. It's fairly cool because it is winter time, but you will need all day to do it.
The circuit to the top of the range and back is about 14 kilometres, so Mum and I reckon we probably won't go the full distance. But we're keen to see some of it, so we decide we'll go and see how far we get.
It's quite cool in these valleys, especially this early part of the morning when the sun hasn't yet come into the valley. Inside the track here we've got a kangaroo taking a bit of a snack. It's not a bad idea. We're going to do the same thing before we tackle the steep climb to the top. Got something there for me?
Yeah, cheese and bickies.
So we've got 2 litres each. Should be enough. It's not really hot though. I mean,
No, it's not hot, Dave.
if you're here in summer you probably have to carry 3 or 4 litres.
I'm cooling down now, so it's time to start walking again.
Yep, you don't want to get too cold.
The vegetation in the Warrumbungles is quite varied, with the eastern slopes and the western slopes supporting different types of plants. The track is quite steep in places and has been paved in those sections most vulnerable to erosion.
The sun's out now.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? Spiry View Lookout is well named, affording great vistas of the rugged trachyte plugs of extinct volcanoes. This distinctive mountain landform has been attracting visitors to the park for 50 years. The first time I came here, Carmen was just a baby who we carried about in a papoose backpack. It doesn't seem possible that that was 25 years ago.
Well, the walk to Spiry View Lookout is fairly moderate. From here on, the track gets quite steep, very steep in fact, so steep that the girls have decided not to accompany us any further. Robert and I are going to go on. They're going to go back to camp. Shall we go, love? Yeah. See you later. Paved pathway not only assists with the erosion, it also makes walking a lot easier. But it is still quite steep, especially when you're carrying 20 kilograms of equipment in the pack, like I've got. The higher we climb, the more the view opens out. These huge exposed lumps of rock were formed about 15 million years ago, when this was the centre of intensive volcanic activity. Lava poured over the countryside and the mouths of the volcanoes became plugged with a harder, faster cooling lava called trachyte. The softer material has weathered away, leaving this rugged landscape of protruding domes, spires and wall-like outcrops. A sensational landscape of unsurpassed beauty. Well, it's not hard to see why they call this the Grand High Tops. Here on the roof of the Warrumbungle Ranges. One spectacular formation is known as the bread knife. It too is trachyte, and although only a few metres wide, towers 90 metres above the wooded terrain. When standing on the Grand High Tops overlooking the remarkable landscape of what was once the centre of a massive violent volcanic eruption, it is easy to imagine that we are on the roof of the world. In a land as old and weathered as ours, such grandeur is only found in a few parts of the country. On our great caravanning odyssey around Australia so far, we've been able to visit some of them. More lie ahead. We want to explore it all. We are yet to complete our first circuit of the country. We'll return to camp and move on. The urge to explore is calling. The quest continues. Next on Leyland's Australia, we explore the Pilliga Forest. Walk through the frozen world on the summit of Mount Caputan near Narrabri, take a dip in hot artesian waters at Moree, visit the New England Highlands, complete with Celtish connections at Glen Innes, see the historic site where Sir Henry Parkes stirred the colonies into nationhood at Tenterfield, and climb to the top of the largest single piece of exposed granite in the country. Next on Leyland's Australia.
Countryside is on display.
If you like our TV series, you'll love our travel magazine. It's called Leyland's Australia, it comes out every 3 months and it's in your newsagents in the travel section. Leyland's Australia, the ultimate travel magazine.
Leyland's Australia, great Aussie holidays. Australia, let the Leylands show you the way. The Leylands will show you Australia. Let the Leylands show you the